Small Wonder has been amazing, you know, between being here at Charleston and experiencing this house that we're in, and really feeling the spirit of the place. That's you know, been the first thing that I stepped into, and that feels really profound. And the festival itself, with the, you know, the diversity of writers, the stories that are being told, the all the various social issues that are coming through those stories and through the conversations that writers are having with each other, and the facilitators of those conversations. It's been wonderful. I leave every day feeling completely filled, and have to sort of come down at the end of the day and use the writing actually to integrate and to process a lot of what's been said, and sort of let it settle and shift and find a place inside of me as well. So it's been already just such a remarkable experience, and I'm really looking forward to the weekend sessions as well. Before I really began writing fiction in earnest, I was an activist for over 14, 15 years in the Bahamas. I began as a feminist activist there. I was working a lot on women's rights issues, capital punishment issues there. And then after a number of years, I moved towards gay rights activism in the Bahamas. So so much of my work and my writing was very much wrapped around conversations about social issues within the country, as well as you know, looking at issues to do with the Caribbean and the U.S. For example, the U.S. The relationship between the Bahamas and the U.S. So a lot of that was what I was grappling with in my writing and in the work that I was doing there. And I was, you know, as a very young person, actually, I was very aware of Virginia Woolf. I was aware of the Bloomsbury Group, and you know, the connection between them is exactly that. They were also artists who were trying to push the boundaries, trying to find a space for themselves in a society that perhaps didn't recognize who they were or the validity of who they were. And in the Bahamas, you know, we too, as artists, you know, there was especially a group of women artists, the Women Speak Collective. I will talk about that for a moment. It was a group of women who would come together. We were writers. In the early 90s, we had found each other as writers, as women writers, and we were really aware of the conversations that had been had by other women writers here in England, in the UK, in the US, and in other parts of the Caribbean. And we were very interested again in making space for ourselves, making space to hear each other's stories, and so that was a really powerful and empowering time for us in the 90s in the Bahamas. Writers like Marion Bethel and Lynn Sweeting, Audrey Roberts, Nicolette Bethel, many writers sort of came together at that time, and I think it was a time of sort of finding ourselves, our own voices, and what we wanted to say, and how it connected to a Bahamian identity. And so in that sense, there were connections around being women artists that I found very resonant with what was happening here in Bloomsbury. I suppose I just also want to say that for many of us as women writers, Virginia Woolf's work, of course, was really transformative. A Room of One's Own. Many of her essays were the essays that helped to give us permission to find our own words, you know, and to step into the world with those words, and to have permission to experiment and to push boundaries, both in language as well as in our lives. So, so it was a really beautiful moment to have a connection with this festival, and then to be invited to be here for the festival as the international writer in residence. Yeah. It makes me remember when I first read short stories as a child, as a young person, as a 13-year-old, when I was first coming into short stories and literature. Some of the stories that I read were, for example, D.H. Lawrence, Odor of Chrysanthemums, and I think it was Graham Greene and The Destroyers, and I think that was the name of it. There were stories that made such an impression on me that I still remember them today, for the social sort of commentary that they were making about power, about class, about gender. And those stories sort of led me on a journey to question a lot of what I was experiencing in the world as a woman, as a girl, as a queer woman, as someone who needed to make sense of the world in writing. Those stories were a lifeline for me. And I think one of the things that stories do, that perhaps reading a history book doesn't, or reading a book on economics or politics, the way that it connects us to our own experience, to our own feelings, and then puts us in the shoes and in the body and in the heart of other human beings, that connection, it is a powerful one, because it means that we do not have to be in the same country to experience what each other is feeling or going through, and we don't have to be of the same religious faith. We don't have to be of the same political affiliations, but we can feel something that is the same, that connects us as human beings. And I think that is the power of stories. And as a child, I recognized that, and as an adult, it still holds true for me. A short story can take 15, 20, 30 minutes to read, and we are struck with an emotion that can change the focus of our lives. So yeah, I think that they can be really powerful and really valid and valuable today. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a fraught question for me as well, actually. Very, as a young person growing up on an island, I felt that it was a small place. I felt that it was a place that didn't get a lot of recognition, or that it was a place that the bigger countries, especially to our north we have the U.S. and across the Atlantic we have the U.K. And there's a fraught history there, right, of colonialism, neocolonialism, when we look at our relationship to the U.S. And so there's a way in which sometimes a child growing up there, and I would say whether you are Greek or of English descent in some ways, or of African descent, the fact of being contained in this small place where the power dynamic is so obvious in relation to the larger countries, there's a way in which, and I speak for myself, I grew up feeling that our experiences were not as valuable, our stories were not as valuable, our history was not seen as being as valuable as the histories of the countries to our north and to the east, and so you know, many years later, having been very politicized as a young person in the Bahamas, and sort of a lot of my writing being around issues of colonialism and the ways that they have impacted our islands in the Bahamas, to come here is a really interesting, and to be here as a writer and as a Bahamian writer is at once, you know, there's conflict in this experience, as well as, you know, a lot of joy, a lot of beauty in being able to be here. I think I was mentioning earlier that I love being on the land here. I love walking, you know, in some of the places that I know, you know, other literary folk and literary people that I have admired have walked in some of these places, and for me that's such a privilege to be able to do that. So many of the names of streets and of villages and of you know, towns that I'm passing through have, you know, I recognize them from my experiences of growing up in the Bahamas. Lewis, you know, there's a Lewis, Long Island, spelled exactly the same way, and you know, as a child of the Bahamas, as a daughter of the Bahamas, I come here and I recognize so much that is now for me very Bahamian. And the way that we've inherited that also, though, is through colonialism. So it's a grappling, it's a tension that's always existed, I think, for me in the Bahamas, and that exists for me here as well. And I know that it's a tension that many English writers deal with and work with as well. And so, and that makes me hopeful that there's a lot of ways in which, you know, writers in the Caribbean as well as writers here in the UK are grappling with these dynamics of power and of empire and of and what that means now, and how you know, how to address that in our writing and in our work as activists as well. So you know, these are the tensions that made me a writer. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is that there are a lot of places where it's still illegal to be queer or gay or homosexual. There are still places in the world where, whether, you know, it's on the books as illegal or not, religion and, you know, other cultural factors make it virtually impossible for people to be themselves, to feel that they have the right to exist, to belong. You know, there's a big conversation not only about homosexuality right now, but also transgender people are asserting their voices, and this is happening in many places in the US where I'm living right now. That's certainly a big struggle. And so I think that, you know, the struggle continues for so many people to really just feel that they have a right to be here. And so it's, you know, it's empowering to know that in this house there was a man, an artist who lived here and who was doing that work as well of you know, standing up and being who he knew he was, and that history speaks to us now and gives us permission to continue to do the work of speaking up and writing our stories down and painting them on the walls, and continuing the process of redefining language so that we can find a place for our bodies in the language as well, and in you know, in the societies that we're living in. So yeah, I think it's still an important conversation for a lot of us. And I know in the Bahamas, you know, people do not feel comfortable yet to be visible. There's still, you know, far too few activists who are able to come out and to be visible and to speak even on behalf of more of the community. I can think really of only 2 or 3, excuse me. So the struggle really does continue in a lot of countries and towns and cities and, you know, across the Caribbean especially. So. Well, I'm looking forward to all of the remaining sessions that are coming up. You know, I'm looking forward to the Caribbean evening, meeting Olive Senior again. I've met her once before, and just looking forward to hearing her new work and to meeting Anthony Joseph, to being in conversation with them around my own work and Caribbean literature and sort of the relationship of Caribbean literature to literatures here in the UK. So that's something I'm very much looking forward to. I'm looking forward to sort of letting all of these voices, feel like there's just been a wash of voices coming through, and their stories and their ideas and their perspectives, and I'm sort of looking forward to one last walk on the Downs, you know, and letting all of these voices and the ghosts of voices settle or find a place inside of me, and sort of seeing what's going to come from that. I remember feeling at the beginning of the process, when I knew that I would be coming here, that I was very excited to feel that new work is coming through. I just finished, you know, one collection of short stories, and I am on the verge of new stories, and they're sort of all crowding my psyche in this moment, and I can feel that the work and the ideas and the passion that I've seen already in so many of the sessions, that is going to just really expand the possibilities for the stories that want to be coming through now. So I'm just excited to just keep on hearing, and so many of the other writers who are here, and reading their works. And I'm taking back far too many books, but that's okay. I look forward to reading them and getting to know a lot of these writers, who many of them I did not know before this festival. So really grateful for that, and to Small Wonder, and to Charleston Trust, and to the British Council for having me here. Thank you.